Give my spouse a surprise birthday. However, he arrived with his work wife, revealed their affair, and declared our marriage a failure. Ever since I can remember, my spouse has told me how significant turning 40 is. His only wish was to outlive his father. He lost his father age 39. As his 40th birthday approached, I thought a surprise party would be fun. It seemed appropriate to celebrate large and cheerful then. I wanted a gathering for his family and closest friends who loved him most. I did my best to plan. From preparations to visitors, I wanted everything perfect. I specially invited my mother-in-law, Cheryl. I knew my husband needed his mom at this occasion since I've known Cheryl for a long time. Out of town, she lives. I arranged a flight for her to arrive on time for the celebration. When my husband entered a gathering packed of his closest loved ones, I couldn't wait to see his expression. I prepared everything for my husband's birthday celebration that night. The visitors waited calmly as the preparations looked good. When he didn't come home, we stood silently, our excitement nearly overwhelming. The home was dark. That morning, I prepared the stage without revealing anything. I told him I would be visiting my parents' place that night without purpose, so he wouldn't expect anything. I wanted him to assume I had nothing special for his birthday. I imagined his horror when he answered the door and saw the genuine surprise. My pulse raced when my husband's automobile entered the yard. My skin nearly glowed with excitement. We stopped and listened to his footsteps outside. I giggled as I envisioned him trying key after key in the dark and possibly mumbling in frustration. Finally, the door opened. Everyone shouted surprise happy birthday. The lights turned on and off. I expected a smiling smile, but instead I saw my husband Jackson, tie undone, arms around his buddy April, kissing. He stood at the door. All around us was quiet. Shock and disbelief replaced delight throughout the room. People gasped and gazed at Jackson and April with alarm. My mind struggled to comprehend what I saw. To clarify, my husband and April work together. They haven't worked together lately. She works for him and is on his team, but we're younger. Jackson took me to the corporate Christmas party every year, where I saw her. I've seen her talk to others, notably him. She flirted and joked that she was his work wife, but I didn't take it seriously. I ignored it since she behaved that way with most older men at work. She didn't bother me since I trusted my spouse and didn't perceive her as a threat. I assumed it was her nature. But witnessing Jackson kiss her from the hallway was uncomfortable in ways I never imagined. A lot of emotions hit me. My spouse saw we were all staring at him. His halt came. His eyes were blurry, and he staggered like intoxicated. He responded, oops, and laughed again as he glanced about at his surprise party guests. April stood next to him and awkwardly straightened her shirt. Her lipstick almost washed off with their kiss. My guilt and grief weighed me down in the solitude. Everyone watched me to see what I would do. Jackson, why are you doing this? She screamed while standing. Jackson was surprised to see his mother and stared at her. His head slowly moved to her. Though bewildered, he said, I didn't expect everyone to be here. He stopped talking and seemed uncomfortable. I approached him with a beating heart. I questioned him why he was kissing April at home while I prepared his birthday surprise party. The inquiry worried me since I didn't know what he'd say. Sighing, Jackson shook his head. He took his breath after surveying the room. He stated he would inform them another day, almost like a business announcement. He sneered that because the April surprise party had made him appear awful. He should confess the truth now. April and I are. I'm falling for her after dating her for a long. He glanced at her to confirm, then at me. Was astonished as I stood there. My hubby meant what? I shook and my pulse raced as his words sank in. However, he continued. He said he had been hiding how he felt about April for months, but this year he had resolved to live his life. I couldn't understand what I heard. He spoke such weird comments after years of living with me. Others seemed to have sent them. He detailed how his father died young. No chance to realize his aspirations. He added arrogantly, I don't want to end up like him. I should do what makes me happy before it's too late. What I saw made me gasp and cry. He appeared uninterested in our past. My heart crushed in the moment. It angered and fooled me. I took up the birthday cake I had carefully chosen for him without thinking. Thrown it at his face. Cake stained his pants. People laughed at his expression at first, but everyone gasped. I think the people at our party supported me because they saw how disrespectful it was for my spouse to make fun of me. Jackson was furious as he cleaned his face. He shouted, look what you've done. His furious voice filled the room. You soiled my clothing. His objection seemed insignificant given the gravity of the situation. He couldn't stop staring at his shirt, like it was more important than the fact that he had disgraced me in front of everyone we knew by lying to me. After looking at me, Jackson stomped upstairs to change, while April stayed there and stared at everyone without feeling horrible. From the time Jackson left, I cursed her. I approached her, grabbed her hair, and dragged her outside. Her cries that I was mistreating her filled the room, but no one helped her. Stop moving. Nobody looked. April attempted to sleep with Jackson beneath my roof during our party in front of all our friends. Even Cheryl yelled at her. When we went outside, I turned her around and said what I was keeping back. Have no trust in you. You slept with my husband after seeing me at this gathering so many times and knowing us from long ago. Hard to believe and upsetting. It all spilled out. But April wasn't afraid. She wasn't ashamed. She shrugged it off, smiling scornfully, as if I were incorrect. She told me Jackson wanted her and I shouldn't interfere. She said that he would leave me anyhow. She then recommended that instead of blaming her, I should consider why I had failed as a wife, hinting that he had resorted to her because I couldn't make him happy. She made me feel like falling every time she talked. This woman's nerve overwhelmed me. He told me you don't understand him as I do. And she taunted me more. He doesn't grin like me. His reason for leaving you. You're not his match. Something snapped when I heard those words. It escaped my mind. I couldn't see. And my hand flew through the air and smacked her face. Jackson's vicious words to me were one thing, but this woman's treachery was another. To hit me again. She started crying and holding her face where I smacked her. Her cheek was furious red and burned from the punch. She yelled profanity at me through tears. Her angry voice was loud and trembling. Cheryl loudly addressed April before I could respond. I'll give you a slap too if you don't leave this property right now, Cheryl said. Though she didn't dare approach Cheryl. The pandemonium in our front yard had attracted the other guests. Outdoors slowly. They watched in awe, some chatting and others too horrified to speak. What they observed at our celebration startled them. I felt their judgmental gaze on April and me. Jackson returned as anticipated. He changed clothes before leaving. After what transpired, they seemed unnaturally calm. His shoulder bag contained some of his belongings. That took some time to figure out. He ran to April's side and wrapped his arm about her, as if she were harmed after seeing her holding her cheek and crying. Why are you suffering? He shouted at me, making me angry and disappointed. He gazed at me as if I had done something unforgivable. He saw me as the evil guy since I struck his sleeping partner. He spat more hurtful comments. This is over. He shouted, I'm done. Leave the home when I return back from our trip. Hope to never see you again. While going, he broke up with me and planned a weekend getaway with her. Watching him carry April to his vehicle and drive gone without a thought left me stuck in astonishment and anguish. I felt a profound, aching hole as I watched his vehicle taillights move down the street. I felt like someone ripped my heart out. Cheryl looked as unhappy as me. I was mortified when everyone witnessed my marriage fail in front of them. Bless Cheryl for taking hold of the issue immediately. She requested everyone to leave politely, thanked them for coming, and apologized. People gave me odd embraces and soothing comments before departing. I didn't feel anything while attempting to find out what occurred. Cheryl showed me where to sit once everyone went. My shivering hands scarcely registered when she offered me water. I cried when I realized it was only her and me. Too long since I uttered it. My astonishment and guilt came when I was alone with her. I didn't want to cry in public. I couldn't believe what occurred. My husband left me after kissing a coworker at his surprise birthday party in front of relatives and friends. After that, he rudely expelled me. I told Cheryl I lost everything, crying. I didn't know how or where to start afresh. Many years have gone since my marriage. I cooked, cleaned, and resigned my work to care for my ailing husband, who always desired a stay-at-home wife. I was left with nothing after he abandoned me. I glanced and felt lost. This was our home for years, and I couldn't imagine leaving. After hearing this, Cheryl shook her head and told me something I appeared to have forgotten. See, Jackson and I resided in someone else's house. Cheryl treasured her late husband's house and its memories. Jackson and I were able to start a family and rebuild our life here because to her generosity. It seemed like a blessing to start afresh in a loving and supportive environment. Now that life was finished, Jackson's lies damaged Cheryl's faith in us. After what my son did to you, I feel ashamed that I raised such a monster, she said pitifully. The type only a mother could feel when she saw her child had changed so drastically she scarcely recognized them. She held me with relief and promise. She stared at me and said, This is my house and I decide who lives here. I chose you. Her remarks provided me power in a situation where I felt powerless. She said that Jackson and April will be caught. She wanted to instruct Jackson, show him that his actions have negative consequences. She then spoke sternly, reminding him that leaving a marriage would cost him. She said something that made me grin despite everything going wrong. April Scrania won't live with my son. She doesn't mess up my family's house. When Cheryl looked for me instead of her son, I expected her to support him, not defend me. We were ready to demonstrate Jackson life wasn't easy. Jackson may have imagined he could quit our marriage and find love elsewhere. I was relieved by Cheryl's remarks. It was like a weight was lifted knowing I wouldn't be evicted from my home. Cheryl's encouragement provided me the strength to handle things alone. I signed a leasing agreement with her over the weekend, making everything official. I had proof, so Jackson could never kick me again. With the agreement, I had solid foundation. I carefully packed Jackson's belongings that weekend. Disposing of our joint lives was oddly therapeutic. I neatly stacked them on the porch so he could find them after his vacation. I didn't see his car enter the driveway for another week. I had planned everything by then. Because I understood what would happen, I installed security cameras outside the house. I wanted the cameras for my safety in case something went wrong. I would never let him ruin my life again. I replaced the locks too. He tried his key, but the door wouldn't open. He fiddled with the latch before realizing he couldn't enter. He shook his head in rage and banged on the door like a drum. "Open the door," he shouted, furious. I could see him via the webcam, being oddly peaceful. The last several days made me reluctant to let him back in. I spoke via the speaker without opening the door. I attempted to sound nonchalant. "Jackson, why are you here?" Almost bored, I asked. His outraged response was immediate. He was furious and told me I was overstaying and had plenty of time to go and pack. "I should have left by now," he said. He raged at me about how sick and weary he was, and how he couldn't bear my neediness and desperation by being here even after he had broken our marriage publicly. He wanted a divorce and to be free of me since he didn't like me. From the window he observed the boxes being packed. He stopped talking. He must not have realized. Those outside items were his previously. He stared at the boxes, and then the door, shaking his head like a joke. However, he knew it wasn't. "Do you believe you can discard my stuff? Do you think you can get away with this?" He stormed back to the door and slammed his palms into the wood. "You should not do this," he cried. "I'll take you to court if I have to," quivering with rage. "You hear me? My lawsuit is coming. You can't evict me from my house." I let him continue and saw him swear and pace violently on the porch via the webcam. It was almost hilarious that he still thought he was in command. I leaned closer to the speaker and kept my calm as I told them this wasn't his house but his mom's. The home was mine after Cheryl and I rented it, so I warned him he was breaching the law. I told him he could sue. But I didn't think he had a case. I paused to ensure he understood. I warned him to go immediately or I will contact the police. Looked at Jackson via the webcam. He seemed perplexed and unsure of what was happening. He seemed almost sorrowful standing there frozen. The perplexity gradually faded and was replaced by wrath. He shouted and grabbed his phone as the doorbell rang. I assumed he called his mom to get help and protect him. I knew Cheryl wouldn't attempt that. I was confident she would tell him what I did, that it wasn't his house longer and he had to face with the consequences. On the porch, he paced, kicked boxes, and cursed. It was obvious that his conversation with Cheryl was failing. He stomped and kicked one of my neatly packed boxes, displaying his fury. His belongings tumbled on the porch, and I heard him swearing at the door. Over the intercom, he called me a thief and said I took his house. "This costs you." Saying that repeatedly, I didn't see the sense in fighting back against his comments. It seemed he couldn't do anything. He could sue, but we knew he had no case. He broke our marital vows and deceived me in the worst way, so he couldn't say I wounded him. After what seemed like an hour of anger outdoors, he was exhausted from fighting. After realizing he couldn't win, he looked dejected. His shoulders slumped. Jackson had no choice but to load his cartons into his car. I observed him pack his remaining items in the trunk, close it, and drive away. Jackson and April have left me voicemails since then. Each of their texts has gotten meaner. April likes calling me a witch for getting Jackson out of the house. She claims I ruined their chance to start anew in this house. Their messages reveal Jackson is uncomfortable in a motel. "AITA, you kicked my husband out for hurting me. April lives with 2 other individuals in a residence with severe regulations, so Jackson isn't living with her. Funny enough, she won't let Jackson move in. April should break her rental contract and locate a place for them to reside if they love each other. Actually, it's no longer my problem if people do what they want. Right now, I want Jackson to pay for his actions in several ways. I've sought for a divorce and will battle him until he pays me a lot. He may have assumed he could quit the marriage easily. However, he will soon realize that lying to someone who has always been loyal has consequences. Wants to be with April forever. Okay, but he must help me reconstruct my life, whether he wants to or not. Once again, 2 months have passed since my last post. As instructed, I emailed Jackson's workplace about his relationship with April. I knew airing our bad laundry wouldn't make him feel better about betraying me, but I did it for his coworkers. I told you everything Jackson informed me about their affair in my email, including that it had lasted months. I mentioned seeing April flirt with older men at business events. To clarify, their connection constituted an abuse of my trust and frequent workplace violations. I was astonished to find them unhappy after a week of silence. Jackson's coworkers, some of whom had become my friends, told me the HR department was investigating. The employer ignored my communication, but word went out that he favored April more than other staff. He had favored her for a long time, which made office mates laugh and grouse. My thorough report and employee concerns forced the business to investigate. Jackson's romance became business, which changed everything. After a few days, my pals told me Jackson was dismissed for the inquiry. I was thrilled to think he would be fired and unable to enjoy his affair. April may not experience the same. Some of my acquaintances say HR is investigating what she did, but I haven't heard anything formal. Part of me hopes she gets what she deserves, but I can't alter anything now. I'm in good shape regarding alimony, and if I'll get anything when Jackson's dismissed. Jackson's wealth has grown, yet he doesn't spend much on us. He seldom gave me anything. We rarely went on date evenings, or traveled. Now I know the warning indicators were always there, I simply didn't notice them. Now I'm solely thinking about ending the divorce. Will do everything to receive what I deserve. To take less is unfair after all I've endured. Since Jackson lost his job and other things transpired, I feel like starting anew. Ready to proceed. 3. My previous post was 7 months ago. I apologize for the delay, but I am now dating again after divorcing. Jackson was furious at me throughout the divorce because I was alleged to have lost him his job, but he couldn't do anything. Many saw him kiss April at his surprise party and hear him admit to cheating. I didn't get much alimony, but I got enough to start anew. The first thing I did after getting divorced was go to the beach alone and drink drinks all day. Currently, I work part-time at my friend's shop and plan to get full-time work. Cheryl and I keep in touch. She's been my rock throughout. Her kindness and acceptance helped me heal. April and Jackson are dating. April was likely never fired. I hear her coworkers no longer trust her. Most don't appear close to her anymore, because they don't want to be associated with a major corporate issue.